And welcome to Hypothetically Intentional, where we ask the question, what if you set intentions with everything you do? I'm your host, Michelle Albers, and today I'm going to start setting an intention, tell a little story, and then invite my special guest to join and offer some wisdom. I'm going to say wisdom. So my intention for today is to share my version of a story with you all, or my piece of a story is maybe a better way to put it, where I honor and respect the privacy of all the other parties that are involved. But my piece, I had an aha moment within it, and this is the type of thing normally we would dig into at a Choose Yourself Summit. But my hope in sharing this piece of the story is that it helps someone out there have an aha moment or feel supported in maybe their own version of something similar. So, the story. Recently, the last couple of weeks, I would say there was an incident that stopped my world spinning. Like my world stopped spinning, but the world kept spinning, and it was a lot of stress. And I had a lot of just aha moments within it. But when I got home after being away from home due to said incident, I was in a training. It was so funny. It's like I got home from this super stressful time that I actually felt like I navigated pretty dang well and stayed really present within, which was a little bit shocking to me because I didn't know I could do that. And it happened. And then I got home and I had this training, and literally the presenter said, to be in survival mode is a decision. And then followed that up with, are you showing up as the best version of yourself? And my instantaneous reaction actually at that point was, oh, I feel like I just got out of survival mode. And then I stopped myself and I was like, wait, hang on. You actually weren't in survival mode. Like you stayed present throughout this whole thing that sucked and was hard and it was really scary for me. And for probably many people that were involved. And I recognized that I was really present. I was very much an advocate, not only for everyone involved, but also for myself. And the fact that I danced that duality or that those boundaries and did it in a way that was actually productive and left me not feeling guilty or shamey was really interesting. So I think I'm going to pause there, and I just want to invite our friend, Kat Cronemeyer, my doctorate level psychologist friend, who helps us unpack like how our brain works and how we might navigate these things. Because that was a really big statement that I heard in the training of survival mode is a decision, literally right after. I mean, I had just gotten home. I hadn't slept in my own bed for over a week. I was exhausted. I hadn't been sleeping. I was managing that part of my stress very poorly because I needed sleep. But everything else, I felt like I didn't feel like I was in survival mode. I felt like I was dropped in, very present. I wasn't worried about the past. I wasn't hanging on the future. And I was just like, what are we doing right now and what needs to be addressed? And I wasn't in survival mode. Like that's not survival mode. And so I was like celebrating after I was super mad that they said that thing. And I found the dichotomy of that even just entertaining. So welcome, Kat. What do you think? I'll just drop a big,
Yeah.
you know.
Thank you for having me. Congratulations on feeling like you made a decision in those moments, because that is really, really hard to do.
Yeah. And it was hard to do.
Yeah.
But I also feel like I was exercising a muscle that I had been building that I didn't realize that I had to the capacity that I did.
Yeah. And I think my initial response might have been similar to yours when you told me about the training and the statement that was made. My hackles went up and I was like, oh, don't say that. Like, that's not true. And I was like, okay, hold on, breathe. So, like, think about this. And you made the good point of, I think there's a difference between something that happens that's discrete and big, and it's, something major and then it's done, versus something that is ongoing for a long period of time. And like in your resourcing, right? Like how well resourced are you to recognize like when you're starting to slide into a survival place, and how do you like become aware of that, like take a pause, make some better decisions for yourself. Um, yeah, so there's just a lot of layers there.
Right. So many layers. And I do think I was doing that. Actually, that was one of the reflections I had. I was like, gosh, I was using my soul care toolkit and I wasn't even at home where I keep it. You know what I mean? It was
That's
coming from
amazing.
internally
Yeah.
because I would go take walks. I would just take a moment and breathe, or I would start organizing like questions that I might have that I could
Mhm.
ask the experts or the powers that be so that I could get information because everything felt out of my control, literally
Right.
everything. There was nothing I could do about what was happening other than use the resources that were at my disposal
Mhm.
and then really be mindful and choosing how I was showing up. But it felt like it was all meant, not maybe not all, but a lot of it was done in reflex.
Mhm.
But that was what I was celebrating when the statement was made about
Right.
to be in survival mode is a decision because I felt like I was making mindful choices about like questions I was going to ask or how I was going to navigate like showing up from compassion. But outside of that, I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I didn't know what to do even for a lot of it. And I know that when I don't get sleep, I don't function well.
Mhm.
So I was being extra mindful about showing up from a place of compassion for myself and the others
Mm.
so that I didn't just go total like I haven't had any sleep, I'm a complete bitch mode.
Right.
Or just completely crying all the time because I
Mhm.
don't have the energy to do whatever needs to be done.
Or being so far in your emotion that you, like, can't take care of yourself or anything that needs
Right.
to get done.
Right. And so I don't know how much I would have reflected on the last 2 weeks that quickly
Yeah.
without that question or without
Right.
that statement in that training. And I feel like it was divinely guided because it really allowed me to drop in and recognize A, the growth that I've had, B, the amazing support that was surrounding all of us, as a team of professionals helping out with things. And then just how grateful I am for those resources.
Mhm.
Because I also had people back at home that were reaching out, and you were one of them, asking me how I was, which is ridiculously supportive, even if you don't need anything or there's nothing that can be done,
Mhm.
just to have somebody reach out and say, I care. How are you? What do you need? I don't know what I need. I can't answer that question. I think I'm taking what I need in the best way I possibly can. And the fact that you reached out literally made me cry.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And I even like turned to people in the room and I was like, what? People being nice. Why does that make me cry? Like, I don't understand. And then
And
I was like,
my check-in was, like, one sentence, like, "Hey, how are you?" Question
I
mark.
know.
Or something along those lines.
Yeah, super simple. And I was just like, but I think it's because the other thing I realized, I didn't tell you this part yet. I realized that I'm a breath holder. I've talked about that many times in summits, but I hadn't been holding my breath physically. But I was having a conversation, actually, Lee, Aaron Smart, who's been on the podcast before, I was having a conversation with him on my drive home. And he asked me something. I don't remember what he asked me. And I go, you know what? I haven't been holding my breath. I've been mindful about not holding my breath throughout this whole thing. But you know what? Energetically, I had been holding my breath, like my aura. I was holding my energy.
Oh,
Like I
yeah.
was energetically holding my breath. Like I don't know how to explain that other than to say that's what it felt like. But I did not realize that until I could exhale in that conversation on my drive home. It was so interesting.
I was just thinking about it, like, when you go into a CT scanner, and if you are a human of any size or like an MRI machine, I automatically like hold everything in because like my shoulders will I'll feel like it's really small and like I have to like go inward on myself as you like slide in as the table slides in. But I'm thinking about that as like energetically holding your breath. Just like everything
Yeah,
sort of like sucks in, gets tight, and you just hold it there.
it was that. And I almost like, as you say it like that, I almost wonder if that's not like a spiritually guided spirit guide, like me
Right.
keeping myself safe
Right.
because I'm not in a place where I can be energetically open. And I typically walk around pretty darn open energetically. And so I wonder if that wasn't
But
like a,
hospital's a terrible place to do that. Like,
right,
oh, yeah,
right.
yeah.
So it was like this, oh my goodness. I've been holding my breath energetically, but now that you say that, I'm like, I
Mhm.
think I've just been like my spiritual team was like,
Protecting.
we're protecting you
Mhm.
because you're in a space that doesn't feel good or safe or,
There's a lot of
and
people
it's
with a lot of need.
depleting. Yeah. And yeah. Oh, that's kind of an amazing little aha moment I just had
Mhm.
thanks to you. Cause yeah, it was scary and there was a lot of people involved
Mhm.
and just like, a whole team of people, professionals offering support and care. And yeah, if I would have been open also, like as an empath, I probably just felt way too many things where we were. It was way too many things
Yeah, hospitals are
to
really
holding on to. Yeah. So yeah, sleeping in a hospital room, for 5-ish days and then not being able to go home right after that either
Mhm.
was just a lot of me not sleeping. And then I actually, when I got home, I thought I was going to sleep like a rock when I got to my bed. And it was the exact opposite. I couldn't turn off my brain. I didn't feel, I still was in fight or flight mode, and I could not, no matter what tools I used, I couldn't get myself into parasympathetic nervous system. And I was like, okay, I'm listening. I understand, like you've been hanging on for too long. And it's going to take you some time to actually unwind enough so that you can get into your parasympathetic nervous
Mhm.
system, which is where, again, calling people like you and, just allowing myself. I think we had a whole day planned, and I was like, can we please just do lunch? And I wasn't even going to do that. I was going to shut that down because I felt so far behind
Oh, I just
and
assumed it was gonna
everything
get
was
canceled.
happening.
Yeah.
And then I was like, I need, like, literally just, I need a hug. Like, I need a hug and a lunch with a friend that I know can hold some space. And I allowed myself to take that maybe for the first time in my life,
Mhm.
and maybe that's not true, but that's not a normal for
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
Normally my default would be like, okay, I got to catch up. I got to make
Keep
sure
drinking.
I make up all the time I lost with
Mhm.
people that I had to cancel things on. And I
Right.
would have gone into that mode. And I was just like, I'm not going to do anybody good if I don't figure out how to sleep. And so I need to allow myself not an entire day, because that would have taken me to the stress side again,
Mhm.
but a lunch where I get to decompress and either talk about it or not,
Yeah.
but spend time with someone who can give a great hug and a smile and ask me questions that make me cry in a good way because I feel loved and cared for and supported.
Right, right.
So that's pretty
You
amazing.
you made it a really, well, and thank you for those sweet compliments, that's really nice. You also made a statement about you were still in fight or flight, but then you talked about making a choice about not being in survival mode. And in my head, those things are the same,
Mm,
but it doesn't
they're
sound
not
like
for
you
me.
meant it in a different way. So I'm super curious about how you define both of those things.
I feel like the fight or flight for me is very much a visceral response in my body that is
So like
out of my control.
body response.
Yep,
Okay.
body response. My body was still in fight or flight. I don't feel like I was ever in survival mode, fight or flight within the whole situation. I feel like
Mhm.
I was very aware, very grounded, very intentional, and very much in acceptance that I was not in control of this ship.
Mhm.
That it was out of my control, and the only thing I could do was show up resourced with great questions and offering as much compassion and open-mindedness as I could to evolve the situation at hand in a way that got the support and professional care that was needed.
Mhm.
That was a very, I don't know, I dropped into that in a very way more grounded way than I ever have
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
But I feel like part of that is because of the experience I had with my mom. Like when my mom had her stroke, it was very much, I could either go into that I hope mode, or I could go into radical acceptance of what was actually happening and try and get accurate information
Right.
from the doctors and nurses so that I could call my friend who was who I know knows a lot about this, and he was a godsend. He answered so many questions for me when my mom
Mhm.
passed, because I just was like, the doctors are saying this, but I feel like they really mean this, and can you tell me more about, and he was very open and honest and bold with me, and that was awful and comforting all at the same time because I needed to hear the hard things. And sometimes, I don't know. There were a couple just messages that we received. I got confusing messages, and I don't know if it's because I was in complete like freeze and not processing well because my mom wasn't doing well and I was in shock still, or if they just simply weren't speaking clearly. And so for me, that's always call someone you trust that knows more than you do,
Mhm.
that can help you navigate what's being said or not said.
Right.
And he was like my angel in that. He just helped me so incredibly much. And so in this, I feel like because I had that, like I learned a lot in that experience. I learned a lot that like being grounded and present and asking good questions is way more caring for the person who's being cared for than to just pretend like you know but you don't.
Right.
And so I feel like that previous experience just gave me permission to ground and ask really like hard questions that you maybe don't want to know the answer to,
Mhm.
but that will give you information that then can get you to more help.
Yeah.
and that's what happened in this instance. It was definitely like the questions that I was asking were getting more information so that we could get the most help possible, so that like recovery can happen and full recovery
Well, you get
perhaps.
best
And so
chances of having like a super good outcome.
exactly. And so it felt like I was showing up with a purpose and an intention that wasn't about me, or even about me trying to hang on to control that I knew I didn't have. It was about using the resources that were there and talking to the experts and the people who can provide the support, and asking questions that, might be, no might be said, but also yes might be said. But if we don't ask, we don't have any information, and then we don't go anywhere. So it was an interesting, I mean, it was exhausting. It was an exhausting week. And like, that's where I was like, oh, I was in survival mode. I was so exhausted. But then, like, when they said that, I was like, I actually was not in survival mode. I was
Like
in,
emotionally, like, and mentally, you were very much not. You were like planful and intentional and like calm and
yeah,
making really solid decisions. Your body was really crappy about it.
my body was
But,
not
like,
happy at all with
probably
me.
pretty unhappy. Um, but it's interesting because first, have you read the book The Body Keeps the Score?
I've heard of it a
Yeah.
bunch of times, and I understand the concept because I
Yeah.
learned a lot about that in Thai massage. I just
Right.
learned it live from a Thai master.
Yeah, I mean, so the idea, Bessel van der Kolk is the author, and he basically talks about like your parasympathetic and your sympathetic nervous system, and like how your body flips into fight or flight, and I think about it as like a light switch dimmer.
Mm.
Like for some people their fight or flight turns on really fast, and for some people it turns on really slow, and people's threshold for like seeing light or having their switch get flipped, it's really variable, right? And it's interesting that you're able to delineate between like the emotion, the cognition, and the physiology. Do you know what I'm saying? Because for a lot of people, they wouldn't be able to. Like their brain would start racing, their body would respond. I'm thinking about me. This is how I would respond. My brain would start racing, my body would flip into fight or flight, right? And then it would be really difficult for me to like, my brain would still race and therefore my body would still race. Do you know what I mean? Like I'd have a harder time like being able to, and then there's that feedback loop of your body's upset, so your brain's upset. And so how do you like slow things down, um, and like make some choices about, what you're thinking about, how you're going to feel about this, and like taking care of your body.
Yeah, even when you were saying that, I think about like the moment that like I made the call, it was like I was shaking.
Oh,
I pulled
absolutely.
over. I wasn't calling people on my phone when I was driving. I was having a conversation before I left, and then a call needed to be made. And I literally pulled off because I was like, oh, I can't do this while I'm driving. There's no way. I don't even. So I pulled off and I calmed down, did what needed to be done. But I was like shaking so bad. I was like, okay, take a couple breaths, get your physical body able to drive again. My brain was fine with all of it. I mean, fine is a strong word, but
Yeah, but
I
you
was
like
I was functioning. I was
yeah.
coping and doing what I needed to do. I knew what needed to be done. I knew no one else was going to do it. So I was like, "You're it, girl. Keep your shit together until you can not have your shit together, right?" And so shaking, take a couple breaths, do what I need to do, drive back, and actually then call back to talk to said party and drive back home, and then literally like wrote notes on the chalkboard, made the other calls that needed to happen, and then just fell down as a puddle. I just need to fall apart so that I can come back together and then show up, because that's what's going to need to happen. This is going to be a long little ride, and I'm going to, but when you were talking about the physical and the emotional, like it's interesting because I get physically like shaking, can't control it. No, I'm okay mentally and will make whatever needs to happen. But like my physical body, and I've actually been thinking, like, I know I need to go schedule a massage. Like, I guarantee you I'm going to have emotional releases for the next little while. Because I know that I was not in survival mode from a showing up in the world standpoint, but in a physical putting it into my tissues standpoint, it all went somewhere because I don't think I released it. I don't think it just moved through me because I couldn't get into parasympathetic to go to sleep. And so I already know that means that I've been tucking it away throughout the couple weeks and just,
coping so you can like sleep as much as you can and then wake up and be effective for your person who's needing you.
Yeah. And so, so I already know I have it on my radar. And I even said, I think I said to Dan, like, I don't know, 3 days after he got home, I was like, I was going to book a session, but I knew I wouldn't be able to turn off my brain. I have too much catching up to do at work. And I know when I go get a session, I really need it to be healing in a way that I'm not in my own way. So I'm just kind of like not delaying it. I'm ready for it, but I'm on pause because I am ready for it.
Right.
And I want to make sure I have the capacity to hold that space for myself, which is maybe a little weird thing to say, but I just think
you need to have space and time to like
yeah,
get the massage, like do the processing, let your body do what it needs to do, and then be able to like come back online.
yeah. And then after I think there's probably 2 massages that are going to happen. I already know the people I'm going to.
Perfect.
And then I'm going to a float tank. Like I know that's happening.
Yeah.
And that's like my soul care toolkit. Like when you've been trying to avoid survival mode, making a decision to stay out of survival mode, maybe is a better way to put it. Like I think my body went into survival mode, like from a visceral, like physiology perspective, but like my being wasn't. I chose to show up in a different way than I would normally show up. But I think that started like for these kind of like what I would call a crisis and an emergency crisis that's just bam, here it is. You got to deal with it whether you like it or not. I started learning how to navigate that when mom was in the hospital. So I don't know. It's just so interesting how the timing of all that. Like literally get home. I wasn't even going to do that training but then I was like, well, I think this will actually be good for me today. It'll give me something to ground into almost as a distraction, but a mindful one, a mindful choice of a distraction so that I can come back into being me and not in holding space mode, but holding space for myself and only myself. And then that was said. And I was like, okay, spirit guides, what is this all about? At first, I was kind of a little snarky about it. And then I was like, oh, this is literally a high five. This is not a spiritual 2x4. This is a spiritual high five. And they want me to see and know and understand that I made a different decision than I would have made in the past. And that's a good sign of evolution and growth and believing in divine support and presence, because that was very much there.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know, it felt good.
Yeah, I was just thinking earlier as we were talking about layers too, and like layers depending on like who the person or people are that are involved in need, and like what your relationship is to them and what your boundaries are, and are your boundaries well established or not? And yeah, there's so much that was going well for you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
right.
when the incident happened and like how you were able to choose to show up. Because if this had happened 10 years ago,
yeah, who knows? I didn't have skills then, and I didn't. Yeah,
well, I mean, you did, and also they weren't the skills that you have now,
right?
And like, how would you have shown up then?
Right.
Yeah.
I remember thinking there was a moment in all of it where it was like I paused and asked myself, like, is there anyone in my world right now that I need a healthy boundary with? And it felt really good to say no. Like, I mean, they're already there. It was like I didn't have to set anything new because I already have my boundaries. And the other thing I paused to consider, because and part of this is like it wasn't in the crisis when I was having these ponderings, right? It was like when I could take a breath and just be reflective and aware and bring in some mindfulness. I was wondering about like, am I exactly where I need to be right now? Am I choosing this for all the best and highest good? And do I have any regrets? And I was like zeroed out in my mind that I was exactly where I needed to be. There were no regrets. I was where I needed to be for me, for, you know, my family and everyone involved. And it felt good to like know that without a doubt. I feel like old me would have just been wondering, like, could I have done something better? Could I have done something different? Should I, am I making things worse? Am I making things better? And I didn't have all those questions. But I kind of want to circle back to like taking me out of the equation. Like this whole, survival mode is a decision. And are you showing up as the best version of yourself? Like, that is such a messy statement to me on some levels, but also I feel like it's an empowering one depending on your perspective. And the other thing, like it could also potentially be inspiring. Like if you don't have a lot of people in your world that feel like they're supportive and you're not in survival mode at the moment, like I don't know, I'm the human where I'm like, how many people do I have in my corner that I can call on? Because if it's not enough, I want to gather more.
Right.
Not that I'm preparing for survival mode, but really that it's like to make me really have some awareness and mindfulness of who are my people? Where do I find my people? How do I find more people? Do I feel lonely? Do I not feel lonely? And that's a hard journey too, to find the communities of people
Yes.
that support you and truly aren't coming from old patterns and wounds that don't actually support you, but feel like they do because of, your conditioning or programming
Right. Yeah, that's a super good point. I was just thinking about like, okay, so like who are your people? Like who do you call? How are they going to respond? Who do you call based on what you need? You know what I
right.
mean? And when I say call, I'm, text or contact. I know there are people who hate phones and do not want to speak to each other, which is fine. But who do you reach out to and get support from? Um, and I'm thinking like my boundaries now are so different and like how I've chosen to show up in times of like crisis or distress because I've had a few this summer.
Yeah.
Um, less intense than yours maybe or just differently intense than yours and showing up in a way that like I don't regret that I feel fine with. You know what I mean? An old me would have been like, you need to do more, you need to do more, you need to do more, like to the detriment of yourself.
Yeah. To the point where
Right.
it puts you in survival mode.
To the point where like you're not okay. And knowing that when I would do that, I would show up just so emotional. You know what I mean? And like so teary and like not helpful to myself, but probably also not helpful to the person that I'm spending time with, trying to like be supportive of and help take care of and all of those things. Yeah, but yeah, like so many layers. And I think that the support question is a really, really good one
Yeah.
about like healthy boundaries and who are your people and who can you rely on without question.
Yeah.
And knowing that they're going to be able to take care of themselves and not get caught up in your drama.
Hmm. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and then I also always find it beautiful, like the angels that come out, like the earth angels that come out and
Oh
offer
my
support and help
gosh,
people that I
yes.
don't even know.
Right.
I
Perfect
was like, oh
strangers.
my goodness. I mean, other people know them, but I don't. And
Mhm.
they're like reaching out and offering all these things. And I'm just like, wow, this is amazing and
Yes.
unexpected and such a relief. And that's where I go into both like the humanness and the divine and support
Mhm.
and how it's like, I mean, a number of earth angels that have showed up in various times of my life where I've been in one thing or another where I'm just like, how am I so lucky to have
Yes.
that?
My mom and I just had a conversation about that. Like
Yeah.
people who just show up and are like truly amazing, amazing humans and like
Yeah.
just feeling so grateful.
And I recognize that not everyone has that or has that feeling.
Mhm.
I also feel like I didn't start seeing them until I started actually looking for them.
Mhm.
Um, so there like might be some hidden gems, I guess is my point there.
Yeah.
Not that like you have to go find them, but just that there
Mm-mm.
might be some hidden gems that it's hard to see because there's so many other that aren't hidden and aren't gems,
Right. Right. Yeah.
depending on what your world situation is.
Yeah.
And that's where I think being able to have conversations like this with you and us being able to dive in with people at the summits or the choose yourself events
Mhm.
is I see it as a magical experience for me because there's always an aha moment and there's always like somebody shares something where it shifts your perspective in a way where now you can't unsee it and your whole
Mhm.
life has changed in the very best way simply because somebody was brave enough to say a thing that like changed my world and
Right.
who knows how many else in the room, but I don't know, that's why I find these, I mean, that is the intention of this podcast, is to have conversations that can help people help themselves
Right.
and find other people who can support them in that. And it doesn't have to be us,
Mhm.
but find your people, look for your people, open to the possibility that it's possible to find those people and lean in. I don't know. It was such an interesting journey. And it's funny, I'm finding like my energy levels since I got back. Like I'll be like, "Ooh, I'm great," and then just crash. And I know it's because I'm still trying to. I mean, I know you can't catch up on sleep, but I'm just trying to catch up on sleep because
Get your
it feels
body
like I
calmed
very much
down.
need
Well, and
to.
it's just like allow yourself to rest.
Yeah,
Yeah. After
yeah,
being and like you're on. when you're in those situations, you are on. And
all the
even when
time.
you're like unconscious and trying to actually sleep, like you're still processing things, you're still thinking about things, you're still making the list of things. Oh yeah, I need to ask this person this, and don't forget to bring up this. And when Browns happen tomorrow, talk about this and fill this prescription, and then all of the stuff at home that you're missing, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fascinating how we process life. And then there's been three times that I can think of specifically in my life where literally the world stopped spinning, but
Yeah.
I know the world is spinning, but like my world
Yeah,
stopped
your
spinning.
world stops.
And
you
I know
think
the
like,
rest of the world is still spinning, but there you are with like this stopped world going, how are we going to do this?
yeah. And
And
why is the rest of the world moving along like everything's fine? Because it's not.
yeah,
It is
right.
1,000% not okay right now. And
Yeah.
no one needs to be like driving and going out to lunch and having a good time because everything is effed.
Yeah, because how dare you? This is about me.
Right.
But just those moments where the world stops spinning and you recognize that that is how you are feeling and that is what is happening. And then you remind yourself that it's a good thing that the rest of the world is still spinning.
Yes. Yes.
Like, but
the
it takes a
mundane can
hot second to
still
get
be
there.
mundane. Yeah. Well, and I wonder if, like, like you say that the world stops spinning, and without those moments, we don't have any perspective.
Right.
Like we lose track of what's truly important and thinking about like what regrets do we have, and what relationships are actually important. Like those events give us perspective, for better or worse. They just give us perspective. And when you're able to like slow down and think about them later, then you recognize like, all right, these are the things in my world that are really lovely.
Yeah.
That I'm so thankful for.
Right.
Yeah.
And sometimes the simplest thing,
Mm-hmm.
like I literally was like, I need a shower. And there was a shower in the room. And I was like,
Nope.
can I take a shower? No, 100% I did.
Yeah.
I was
Oh
so,
no.
I
When you
was
get
like,
desperate, yeah.
I was like, I'm 100% taking a shower here.
Absolutely.
I'm like asking the nurse, I'm like, is there towels somewhere? Like I'm like, do I need to, I'll go buy a towel. I'll go buy whatever I need. And they actually sent my boys off to like go find shampoo and conditioner.
Right.
And a towel. And they came back with like this janky, like set of like Johnson and Johnson's baby shampoo and a ginormous bottle of conditioner of a different brand and two little mini samples of baby shampoo. And I was like, I'll take it. And
Yes,
like, a
thank
bitty
you.
little towel.
Thank
I'm like,
you.
well, I feel ginormous. This is great,
You're like, this hand towel doesn't cover my
Like,
butt,
yeah.
but it's fine.
I'm like, but you know what? It's going to do the job and it's going to feel amazing just to like
Yes.
rinse off. And plus, water is one of my things to help me move energy and just like ground back to
Yes.
connect with earth, and
Well, it's like
nature.
physiology
Yeah.
now, like right, not being in survival mode.
I actually took 2 showers in the
Good
hospital.
job.
I
Now
was
that I
like,
say that, I recognize I'm like, oh no, I've taken so many showers in hospitals, like
yeah.
helping people out and just being there and needing to like wake up and like go to work the next morning. So
Yeah.
like, having to shower and like put on adult clothes and roll out the door.
All right.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. So thankfully I'm, coming back into my physiology that is not fight or
Yes.
flight. And
Yes.
I am feeling good and confident about full recovery and, and that all is well again. The world is turning, albeit
Yes.
maybe a little slower than it was before, but I think that's okay. Yeah. I don't know. That's where my brain went today when we talked about recording.
Yeah.
I was
love
like,
it.
survival mode, a decision. Wait, what? That feels mean. And then I was like, actually, that feels empowering and inspiring. And at the very least, it just makes me ask a lot of questions of myself that I wouldn't have asked without that statement.
Right. Well, and I think like for those of us that still might take umbrage with that statement,
Yeah.
because there's part of me that does, like as a therapist, right? And like as being with people who have been through unimaginable trauma, like
Yeah.
unimaginable trauma. Of course they go into fight or flight response. Of course they're in survival mode. Like how, like I don't know how you wouldn't be, and how in that moment you could make a decision otherwise. Do you know what I mean?
100%. I agree with that completely.
And also knowing there might be situations in which you can make a different choice, right? When it's um maybe when it's a longer lasting situation and you need to be caring for somebody for a really long period of time. Okay, like yes, there are going to be times where it is going to be survival mode and your body is going to be in a fight or flight for probably a long time. And also like reminding yourself that you do need to take care of yourself, that you do have to be a priority in the algorithm that is, caring for this other person or these other people.
Yeah. And I think survival mode, at some point, the only way out of survival mode is a decision.
Yeah.
So like that part, like if you
Totally.
just really simplify it down,
Yeah.
like the decision out of,
Yeah.
you don't just snap your fingers and you're out of survival mode. Like,
Mhm.
because when you're in survival mode, it takes an actual effort and decision to get out of it. Like once
Right.
you're there, you don't just like, oh, everything's better, I'm great now. It's like there is a process of healing and attention
No,
and
because your body becomes
kindness.
acclimated to
Yes,
it,
that
right? And
needs
then
to
and then
happen.
you run forever in that place
Right.
versus like, okay, I'm actually going to slow down and take care of my body, and I'm going to be intentional about how I handle my brain and slowing my brain down and like,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I feel like for me, once I kind of simmered down of my initial like guttural reaction to that
Yes.
statement,
Yes.
what I came to like how it feels true for me is there are moments in your life where you are in survival mode.
Yes.
It is like thrown, quote unquote, at you, and you drop into survival mode very quickly based on whatever skill sets you have up until now, right?
Mhm.
And then at some point, the way out of that is a decision.
Yeah.
And it will look different for everyone as to what kind of support they need, who is going to be the guide to, to assist them on that journey, and how active are you in that journey based on how much work you've done within, like how internal are you versus how external are you, and what does that look like for you? And I don't think there's a right or wrong way. I think there's a different way for everyone.
And I just had a client, this coalesces with what you're saying. I just had a client, we had a conversation recently about they're doing really, really, really intense trauma work right now. And it's the first time that they really feel like they're slogging through this really, really difficult work. And I said, like, what's different? And they said, um, you are the one that is sitting next to me and you're with me in this work, but there is no illusion that like you are going to be doing this work for me, or that you have the right
Mm.
answer about how this work needs to be done. I'm like, oh no, like I'm just here and I will be with you and we will have lots of conversations about it and I'll support you however I can. But like at the end of the day, this is yours. And like you need to figure out how you need to navigate through it. And I don't have the right answers.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Sal Jade talked about that last week. I don't know if you've listened to that one yet, but she was saying there is something about not doing the work alone, about giving it to someone else, that holds a different kind of space so that you can then do the work that you have to do. Like you
Mhm.
can recognize that you have to do the work, and it also feels lovely and supportive to give it to someone else. Meaning, I don't mean like give it away like they have to handle it for you, but
Right.
like to have someone hold space with you and for you
Yeah.
as you navigate that journey of actually doing the work for
Right.
yourself, because no one can do it for you. And I think that's where I struggle with, like, the survival mode or like the victimhood stuff is like that does keep you stuck in a place.
Mhm.
And sometimes we need to be in that place for a hot second.
Oh, yeah.
There's a time duration for me where it's like, okay, and everybody's time frame is also different, of like when they're, when it's time for them to step out of
Mhm.
victimhood or survival mode or whatever those states are that tend to keep us in that swirl.
Mhm.
And I'm grateful that I can honor that time for me now, whereas before I didn't. I was waiting for the someone to come rescue me because I just didn't think I could do it myself. I didn't trust myself to do it.
Mhm.
And apparently, I mean, I know that that's shifted, but I didn't know that when my world stopped, that it had shifted as much as it had, until that statement was made and it set me off. And then I reflected very quickly. It was like a snap. And then I was so grateful of the people in my world and the work that has been done and the work that I've chosen to do that
Mhm.
has helped me make what just happened something that didn't take me down a spiral that would take me years to get out of.
Right.
So
That's a
I
huge
don't know.
celebration.
It
That's
really
really
is.
amazing.
Yeah. And it's like, I don't know. I think sometimes people think that like you and I, people like us who are doing the work on the regular, have this, like, we think that we're done, and it's like,
No.
I've never met anybody doing the work who thinks they'll ever be done.
Oh.
Everyone, but I think sometimes, like, when I just started on my journey, I assumed all of my teachers and all of my mentors
Yeah.
had it all figured out and that they knew, right? Like, And I learned very
Experts, they know
quickly,
all the things.
yeah, they're good. They can
Yeah.
handle anything. They never
Yeah.
need help or support. They just look at them. They're so perfect all the time. And it's like, so couldn't be farther, farther from the truth. I don't
You're
know
just
which one to
human, just
use.
like everyone else.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of a fascinating little tidbit as well, is like we're all doing the work in our own way.
Yeah.
And there is no done. I find that refreshing and inspiring and exciting. And I can understand how that might feel daunting and depressing and overwhelming, depending on your perspective of what doing the work feels like. Like, how close are you? How far are you into survival mode? How far are you into victimhood? I think that would change your perspective of how you
Yes.
feel about always doing the work. There's always going to be work to be done. Always.
And instead of feeling overwhelmed by it, I think like the older I get, like my perspective has changed a lot where I'm like, of course it's not done, but that's not a bad thing.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like the slow unveil. It's like the slow unwrapping of the gift. And you get to decide when, where, and how you're going to do it. It's not like just because there's work to be done, you have to do it right now.
Right.
Maybe it's no time. Maybe you're not ready. Maybe the circumstances aren't where they need to be. Maybe your spirit guides are like, oh, pump the brakes. Now's not the time.
Something else has to happen first.
Exactly. And so like instead of feeling like it's I have way more tasks on my to-do list, like no, like that's not the case. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Of course you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And also like it doesn't just have to be like on the checklist because
Right.
that's not how this that's not how
No.
this works.
I just think, yeah, like what if we set intentions with everything we do? What if?
Yeah.
What does that change? You can start so small.
Yeah, it changes a lot, I feel like.
Yeah. Gratitude was such a huge thing. The Zentangle practice that we do, I'm not trying to shift gears totally off, of course,
No, do it.
but I really feel like the Zentangle practice, the Zentangle method for me, that whole starting and ending with gratitude and appreciation, like literally changed my world in such a subtle way where it was one of those things where I was like, I didn't really realize I wasn't doing this. And I didn't even realize I am now doing this, but something shifted. And that's kind of the only dots I can connect in the what's different field of my world. And so I'm like eternally grateful for my CZT training because it was like, oh, I'm focusing on gratitude and appreciation, not despair or all the other pick the dark and gloomy things that I used to go down because I did.
Absolutely.
So I don't know. I think I'm grateful that my spirit guides put these little gems in front of me, and that while I might resist them for just a wee while, maybe years sometimes, I like Reiki. I resisted that for so long. Eventually, I wake up a bit and decide to try it.
Yeah.
I might not all the way choose it, but I decide to give it a go, and then here we are.
Yeah.
Doing what we're doing.
Then it chooses you, and then
yeah.
I remember even a conversation about I don't want to teach people how to do Reiki, and I don't want to, you know what I mean?
I'm not gonna do that.
Like, I'm not gonna be a consultant for Reiki master. It's like, no, there's no way. And then like a year later, you're like, well, I guess this might happen. And then another year later, like you're like, yep, I just taught Reiki 3 to a whole pile of people, and now I'm considering like how to teach the teachers, like how to teach teachers to be teachers. Yeah, like
I do giggle.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I mean, it's no different than how I was as a child, right? Like, tell me what to do doing that. Like,
Maybe that's coming.
That does not sound at all like me. Well, it turns out that was for my best and highest good. Huh.
Right.
Maybe I was a little too resistant on a little too many things, or maybe some other things needed to happen first,
Right.
And I needed to get grounded into some other kind of way before I was ready to.
Yeah, well, and we talked about trust and confidence today, right? Like trusting yourself, having because I just said I'm not confident enough to do something, and you just laughed at me, and I was like, okay, well, I guess that's probably going to happen in the future. Like, get ready, girlfriend.
I'm just a dick. Like, you told me I wasn't confident in doing something, and I laughed at you. It's like that sounds like me, but also like. Sorry. I mean, I feel like I owe you an apology.
No, it's fine because like at the heart of it, like that's my own anxiety and that's my own imposter syndrome and that's all my own shit. And when you laugh at me, I'm like, You're right. You're right.
Well, I'm probably laughing with you if we're being like accurate in this conversation because I literally did the exact same thing. I'm never doing that. There's no way.
Right.
I can't even barely do it today. How could I possibly teach this thing?
Mhm.
And it's like that's why you can teach this thing because
Right.
you didn't know how to do it and you struggled with it and you put some effort into learning it and now you can see more pieces of the puzzle and more layers of the thing than some others because
As opposed
it
to it just
wasn't
being a
you.
gift that's given to
Right,
you.
like
And then you just do the thing and you're like,
I don't know how to teach it. I just do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like,
Versus like having to like actually dismantle it and like figure it out and
mhm,
like struggle a bit.
mhm.
Yeah, it makes you probably a better teacher.
That's why I took like 4 different Reiki trainings, 4 different teachers.
Maybe that's what you're telling me to do. I don't know.
I'm not telling you what to do. I don't know what your guides are telling you
I
what
don't
to do,
either. Maybe I should listen.
I just couldn't find the words or understand how to like explain it to other people. And for me, that was like a missing link.
Mhm.
And I just was like, well, I'm going to just try another teacher. And I loved the first, I mean, I
Mhm.
loved, like I learned a lot in every single class and they all taught in their own different way. And I think it's why my practice is my practice. I got a bunch of different insights and,
Mhm.
you know, their bits of living tradition and wisdom. And now I have mine and it's great. But dang, if I didn't fight that sucker. So let's circle back to the survival mode thing. Do you have, because I feel like I mean, we talked a lot about it, but do you have like what if you're really in survival mode and you want to make a decision to navigate your way out, even just one tiny little step? Do you have like, from the brain perspective?
Um, that's a super good question. I mean, I think it honestly depends on like if you're at a 0 to 10, right? Like a 0 being like you're at your baseline, everything's fine. 10 being like full-fledged panic attack, like shaking, can't breathe, tearful, melting down, like not able to function. I mean, I do it a lot with people in terms of like what would be helpful right now, just right now in this moment. Do you have any ideas? And if they're like, no, I have no idea, then I'll offer ideas, right? So if you know somebody that you can text or call and be like, I'm really struggling right now, I am not okay, I don't really know what to do, can you give me a couple ideas? People love to be helpful, they
Yeah,
love to help you, and half the time your people know you better than you know yourself.
that's fair.
And so they are probably happy to give you ideas. Whether it's, and a lot of times it's physiological regulation that needs to happen first before you can get your brain calmed down. Because if your body's freaking out, it's really difficult. So when your body freaks out, a lot of times it's connected to your limbic system, which is like that fight or flight part of your brain that's like the deep, deep central part of your brain that holds like memory and emotion and fear and all those things. And so your brainstem goes right up to like your thalamus, and your thalamus is like, think like brainstem, back of your neck, back of your head. That brings in sensory information, and the sensory information goes all over to different parts of your brain. But if your brain has this correlation between, oh my gosh, I'm shaky, I'm tearful, like I know that I feel anxious right now and I'm really upset, or I'm like, I'm crying and I'm really sad, your brain's going to like take you to a certain spot automatically, almost, because that's the input that your body's giving it. And so how do you just knock it back a step, right? And so don't think about going from a 9 to a 2. Think about going from a 9 to an 8, and an 8 to a 7, or like an 8 to a 6. And I always say if you are above an 8, you might just have to write it out for a little while. But if you have the wherewithal to call it reinforcements, that's always a good one, because having somebody outside of yourself
Mm,
to help, like sometimes it's like called co-regulation, where somebody's like, here, hold the TheraTeppers, or here, wear your alpha stim, or put a sandbag on your lap, or um like practice slowing your breath down. And like that's when I use a lot with people,
mhm,
is exhale 1 count longer than your current inhale. So if you're like panty and like
mhm.
panicky, I'll just be like, go, like hard
Yeah.
exhale, just short, but it's trying to tell your brain, hey, we got your breathing under control. You're going to be fine. We don't need to hyperventilate. We don't need to hold our breath. Like we actually have our breathing in charge. Like our brain is in charge of our breathing. And that's a huge thing that can help flip the switch on that like fight or flight mode.
Yeah. I do that with people. Like I've had a couple instances
Mhm.
where I've been like near people when they're having a panic attack or
Mhm.
or having just that moment where they're not breathing right. They're not breathing in a way that is useful to them, and it might make them pass out. And I'll just like look them in the eyes and maybe grab their hands if they're open to that, and then just, okay, breathe with me if you can. And I'll just, I'm not going to pant with them, but I'm going to try it, like inhale and then exhale. And I do that what you just did, kind of that poof, the exhale out.
And so then I'll say like inhale 1, try to exhale 2. So just try to push a little bit longer if you can. And so like I will baby step people into like slower breathing. A lot of times I'll also hold their hands. I'll put like fingertips on their knees to try to like get when you're like really anxious and you're like really panicky about something, or you're really revved up, all of your energy goes up to your head. So we think about it like you just disconnect a lot of times from like your legs, like you just aren't even aware that you have legs or that they're there, right? And there's a lot of stuff like in your head and your chest. And so giving people like physical reference. So that's why I'll say like sandbags on their hips or sandbags on their knees, or like some sort of like point of like contact that's not themselves, can help bring their energy back into their body a little bit.
Yeah. Is that, I mean, it might be that they're too far out, but is there ever a time where like doing almost like that being present exercise where you just have them notice things in the room or come into the space?
And maybe that's a skill that you use at like a 4 or 5 or a 6. Right. Where it's like, okay, like, tell me everything that's purple in this room. Like inhale and tell me what you can smell, touch something around you and describe how it feels. I mean, those are all like really, really fantastic mindfulness skills, but like I probably couldn't use them if I was at a 7 or 8.
Yeah.
I'd be like, you are annoying the shit out of me right
now.
Yeah. Give me something.
That's what I mean. Like that's what you mean when you say like whether you're at a 10 or at a 5 or at a 1 or at a 0, it's like it matters.
And
where
you might
are
be
on the
able to
scale.
do things that are much, much more passive. Like I'm going to choose to breathe, exhale to a count of 7 and inhale to a count of 4. Well, you can't do that when you're at a 9, right? Your body just, no, that's
you
not
literally
happen.
just need to have someone tell you how to breathe, like to remind you to breathe,
right? Like I'm just gonna just like automatically deepen that and like go into like like that happening.
Yeah, and I think that just speaks to giving yourself grace and compassion, and if you have the ability to find someone who can help you navigate it.
Yeah. And a lot of people will be like, my mom's like my best human to just call and have a panic attack with, and mom will help talk me through it. Like, okay, great. That's good.
Yeah.
And like, and if your mom's not your person, that's okay. Like find a bestie. Find, and a lot of people will have like therapists who will coach them in the moment when they're having a super hard time. Great. So use your therapy people.
Yeah.
In Minnesota, we have the Warm Line. It's called the Minnesota Warm Line. And so it's an evening like crisis line. Evenings tend to be really hard for people, right? Like mornings are usually pretty good, but like as get tired and your resources are depleted, and like nighttime is hard for people a lot. And so Minnesota Warm Line, you call and you tell them what's up and they'll chat with you. And so I mean, there's all sorts of resources out there, like tons and tons and tons.
Yeah. I like you bringing to the awareness of it depends on where you're at on the scale of 0 to 10, because I think that's a really important piece. Because it is a very different answer.
Yes.
Where your number is as far as how far out on the scale you are.
Yeah.
And to honor that and just give yourself some grace and within it, well, and when I say yourself, I also mean like the person you're holding space for. Like witness and discern what their number is, because they're probably also not going to be able to tell you, especially if they're at a 10.
Well, and like sometimes if they have practice they can, right? But like that's also a skill set,
right?
Like to know your body and your brain well enough to be able to say, this is where I'm at. And some people don't have a lot of room between a 2 and an 8. Like a lot of people can tell me really, really high on the scale or really, really low on the scale. And the middle is often a little fuzzy, which is really interesting. And I would say that that's pretty consistent over time when I actually like do this kind of stuff with people. Middle ground is really difficult. Once people think about it pretty hard, they can come up with some stuff, but the middle area is a little fuzzy sometimes.
Yeah. Well, and I imagine there's not as big of there's a big gap between a 2 and an 8, but between a 4 and a 5, it's like, what is the difference there? What does that look like?
Yeah. And like, and it might change depending on the day, right? And it might change depending on the year and like how old you are and like your development and things like that. Right?
And also who you're surrounding yourself with, right? Because I feel like that would, if you have more resources around you on the regular, it would change what takes you into those things.
And I can say at 20, my jump between a 2 and an 8 was real short. probably
Mm.
like 2.5 seconds.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it was really short. Like, I highly, highly anxious, unmedicated, a person that probably needed meds when I was 12, but didn't want them because there were all sorts of things that came with that, and so resisted, resisted, resisted. And
Yeah.
now, having the appropriate serotonin levels in my body and like having some life experience, um, and some other things happen, like, oh, my tolerance is totally different.
Yeah.
My brain might flip out and I might still imagine the worst and hope for the best and be 14 steps ahead, but I might be at a 3,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. I think that's just such the awareness piece of that is
Mhm.
so huge. So, yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Awesome. How do you feel about this conversation? Does it feel complete? This feels like one of those conversations that if we leave it hanging, like I don't want to leave it hanging. Do
Yeah.
you feel like we came full circle and gave enough tools or even just enough of the stories to be useful versus just like, well, what the heck?
I think so.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
it's a
mean, people
question
can
mark for
always like tell
sure.
us, like people can always comment or like let us know, like, hey, you left this part out, or
Yeah,
like,
we can
what
do a
about
part two for
this?
sure
Yeah.
if
So if
that's
people have
needed.
questions or if they reach out and they're like, I have a question about this. This didn't make sense, or
Yeah. I think I just had one thing pop in. So download. So thank you, Spirit Guides, for that one. But there was I think it was a summit that we did where you had us actually, like, you had us write down what
oh,
it
that
looked
popped
like
in for me too. Yeah.
on our 0 and a 10.
Yes.
And I feel like that was really useful for a lot of us,
Yeah.
if not all of us. So, I mean, can you just like walk through that super quickly? I mean, I kind of just did, but I feel like a little more
Yeah.
description would be helpful.
So what I do a lot is I take a piece of paper and I fold it in half, think like 2 columns, so like hot dog fold. So it's long, you have 2 columns. On the left-hand side, I'll do like 0 to 10 far left of the page in the margin. And then in that second column to the right, so far left, you have the numbers 0 to 10, and on the next one over, I'll say like thoughts, feelings, so like, cognitions, emotions, and behavior. And then so if I want to identify like a freak out, right? I might say like, I don't get shaky like Michelle does. So Michelle might shake, I don't know, like at a 6. Like, I'm just making things up. I have no
Yeah.
idea. But like, I don't shake, and I don't my body gets really, really tired afterwards, but in the moment, my body's physically fine. My
Mm.
brain is racing.
Oh, we'd make a great team.
Right?
I'm the other way.
Yeah, so, like, my brain starts to race at, like, 3 to a 4. I don't know yet, but it's, like, probably somewhere in there, right? If I'm crying, that could be between a 2 and a 7. That doesn't tell me anything. You know what I mean? Like, I'm a I'm a super cherry person, so, like, that's not helpful.
You might just need a cup of coffee or a piece of chocolate or
But I mean, it's telling me more as I get older because I cry a lot less, hell of it, right? Um, but like, now I might be tearful at like a 7 instead of a 3 or a 4, right? And so thinking about this over time, like this is going to change. So if you make one now, you may need to make one again in 3 years or 4 years.
yeah.
But like, how does your tummy feel? How does your throat feel? Does your chest get tight? Like, do you notice that you start to hold your breath or your breaths get shallow? Does your temperature change? Like, does your body temp change? I get hot.
Oh, I get cold.
Like when I get really anxious, I get hot and I start to sweat. If I get really, really anxious, this is so weird, don't judge me. I get like a tingly feeling in my teeth
Mm.
because I think I get so much energy like rushing to my brain, and like there's shame associated with it a lot. And so I get hot, I get sweaty, I get red, my teeth get really tingly. Um, I don't sleep well, so I just like straight up like initial insomnia, middle insomnia. Um, I won't get tired. And usually I'm like, it's nighttime, go to bed now. Like I'm on like a farmer schedule. Right? Like if it's dark, you're sleeping. And so if I can't sleep and I'm not tired, like that's always a sign that I'm like in trouble. But like being able to recognize those things about yourself
Yeah.
is like really, really important. And so like I know if I have sweat trickling down my spine and my teeth are tingling, I'm like in so much trouble.
That's so fast. So for me, the hot comes first.
Does
My
it?
hot is in the lower stages. If I'm cold, I worry I'm going into shock. Like I get so
Oh,
frigidly
do you
cold
really?
where I'm like,
Yeah.
uh-oh, this is trouble.
Yeah.
This is not
But
good.
this is so good, right? Because it's just like all over the board. Our bodies just are like wired to do what they're going to do, like We
Right.
have no
And so there's no
control.
right or wrong. And
No.
if you're listening, like whatever your visceral reaction, you're like the physical response in your
Right.
body or the mental response in your brain,
It is
it
what it
is what
is.
it is.
It's
But to pay
fine.
attention and to know, then to give it a numerical scale
Yeah.
so that
Yeah.
you can understand where you're at. Because if I start getting cold, I know I'm like, I need to do almost like a cozy, I need to
Mhm.
just wrap myself in love, right? Like a cozy blanket
Right.
and just get, and then I'm like, I'm so hot. Once I calm down and come back
Yeah.
into me. But yeah, that's fascinating. But that is a good practice just to give you some awareness. Because if you don't
Yeah.
ever really pay attention in a measurable way,
Mhm.
then it's hard when you're in it. You have no idea like
Yeah.
how far out you really are, or maybe you project yourself out even further than you actually are, and
Yeah.
sort of have some
Well, and I
mindfulness
think
around it.
once you like slow down, once you start thinking about it, it will be in your brain and you're not gonna like lose it. Do you know what I mean? I
Yeah.
think the physical practice of writing it down asks you to slow down and pay
Mhm.
attention. The other piece, so that the next column over, so there's 3 columns in total, right? Like one really skinny one with numbers, you have one with symptoms or like reactions, and then the other one is like tools or things that you know that work, or
Mhm.
maybe things you want to try.
Yeah.
So I'll have people ballpark stuff. So a lot of the time, like you can do more passive stuff, like when you're at a lower place, but you might need to like go for a run, listen to loud music, and go for a walk. Like you might need to like physically move your body and have multiple forms of input the higher you get.
Mhm.
So that might be like a light weighted blanket and calming music and like lavender, right? Like if you're
Yeah.
like at an 8 or a 9, but there might be a lot of different things that you need in order to help knock you back to like a
Mhm.
more reasonable place, you know? And so if you're not sure, just put them on there, put them on like where you think they might be helpful, and then just make adjustments. That's not a problem at
Yeah.
all.
More
Or
information is better.
yeah, and
Yeah.
if there are things you wanna try, great. Then make another column of, like, things that you'd wanna try. Or you're like, "Oh, I used to do this, I don't do it anymore, I wonder if it's still helpful." Put it back on the list.
Yeah.
Because just because you try it once doesn't mean it doesn't work. It means that maybe it didn't work for, like, the place you were at,
Right.
right? So don't write it off. Put it back on the list and try it, like, maybe when your anxiety's lower or, like, when you're stressed out at a lower place. Um and if it legit doesn't work after like a lot of times trying, then that's okay. Let it go. But there might be things that like surprise you that you weren't expecting, or things that you had written off that actually might be helpful again.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah, I hope that made sense with my columns and left and right and all the things.
And they can make it however they
Yeah,
want. Maybe they're a spreadsheet person and they're
right.
they're not writing it, they're typing it. Who
Right.
knows?
I mean, I
But
used to do like little thermometers and like markers and all the things. So
I mean,
now I'm shortcut.
if you're
Now I
if
just
you're
do a shortcut.
if you're gonna analyze your survival mode and like skills, you might as well make it fun and get out the
Right?
smelly
I
markers
know,
and
some glitters, some
and do some
stickers,
art and
some sassy emojis,
yeah, yeah,
flaming dumpster at the top.
right. Mine's like this cold prickly icicle thing. I could do some serious damage, chucked across the room.
Right.
Oh, thank you for sharing this time today. I appreciate it. I was really excited to get your input because I was like, huh. And I had a feeling you would have a similar initial response to that
Mhm,
statement. And then I
mhm,
kind of had a feeling we would land right about where we did, just to
mhm,
like the, oh yeah, oh, and, yes, and,
mhm.
or maybe even yes, but in some cases, but
Yeah,
mostly yes, and.
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing the story, and thanks for sharing that moment of like, "Huh, I need to think about that."
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. That's a wrap for today. Bye. Be you every day. Bye.